For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
All right, I'm going to call to order the joint meeting of the MERC and Metro Council work session, April 27th, 2023. And I will ask our clerk, Connor, to call the roll for attendance. And then we'll play a safety video. And then I'm going to say Vice Chair, Commissioner Damian Hall is going to take over the run of the meeting.
All right, thank you. So, Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Nolan.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Wong.
Present.
Thank you. Let's see, Councillors Gonzalez and Simpson are excused today, and President Peterson.
Here.
All right, we'll now move on to the MERC commissioners. So, Commissioner Martinez.
Not yet.
Not here. Commissioner Milan.
Present.
Commissioner Palm. Commissioner Pendleton.
Present.
And Vice Chair Damian Hall.
Present.
All right. So now I think I got everyone, and we'll go ahead and play the safety video.
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for coming. I'll kick us off into the substantive part of our agenda here today. We've got a cultural planning project update. Thank you, Metro councilors and MERC commissioners. This is I believe the second of our joint meetings that we've engaged to do to ensure that we're communicating openly and having open lines of communication on all of the venue-related items that MERC touches and that are just a portion of what the council does. I think, we used to do this annually, and now we're doing it intentionally more frequently, and it's been going great so far. So let's keep up the trend. Here to talk to us about cultural planning project update, we've got a couple folks, Jeff Hawthorne from the city of Portland and David Pletner Saunders, also a principal at the Cultural Planning Group. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, and good morning. Thank you so much for having us today. For the record, my name is Jeff Hawthorne, and I'm the Arts Program Manager at the City of Portland. My colleague, David Pletner Saunders, is joining us by Zoom from San Diego, and I'll be turning it over to him for most of the presentation today, but I wanted to set the stage a little bit and share some context for our presentation today. We do have some slides to help us through this presentation, so if you're ready with those, Connor, if we could show the first slide, please. Our cultural planning process has a working title. It's called Our Creative Future, and it really is a community-centered process to co-create an arts and culture plan for everyone in the region. And I invite you all to visit our website at ourcreativefuture.org. Next slide, please. In our presentation today, David and I will be talking with you about our process and why it is so important that this process be regional in nature and why the city is leading it. We will summarize the work that we've done so far, and we'll share a few preliminary observations. We will also share our timeline and next steps, leaving plenty of time for discussion with all of you. Next slide, please. First, a few notes on what we mean by cultural planning and why we are doing this now. Our cultural plan is a community-centered process designed first and foremost to assess the state of arts and culture in the region. Some of you are familiar with a similar cultural planning process that was conducted in the 1990s called Arts Plan 2000. That plan, among other things, led to the formation of the Regional Arts and Culture Council, or RAC. And that's noteworthy because prior to RAC, the City of Portland and Multnomah County shared a bureau called the Metropolitan Arts Commission. But the big idea of Arts Plan 2000 was that communities throughout the region would be better served by a well-resourced regional arts service agency that could provide grants, technical assistance, planning, information, and advocacy throughout the Tri-County area. It was a groundbreaking national model at the time when several government agencies, including Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties, the City of Portland, and Metro, entered into an intergovernmental agreement establishing the Regional Arts and Culture Council as our arts service provider in 1995. The city also led another cultural planning process in 2018-19, and former councilor Carlotta Collette was Metro's representative in that process. The primary observation of our 2019 plan was that we as a region had yet to establish a significant dedicated funding source to support our regional approach to arts and culture, and that plan recommended a regional dedicated funding mechanism of $15 million a year to support the cause. While there wasn't sufficient political will to pursue regional funding, the City of Portland proceeded with its own dedicated funding mechanism, the Arts and Culture Access Fund, or Arts Tax, which was approved by 62% of Portland voters in 2012 and raises about $11 million a year to fund arts and music teachers in K-5 schools and grants for arts organizations to help them make their programs more accessible to the public. But of course, a lot has changed over the last 3 years, not to mention the last 30 years, and the city finds that it's time to reassess the state of arts and culture today. We need to revisit opportunities to better support our vibrant creative sector and examine what disparities and inequities exist in terms of public funding and public access to the arts. So we are eager to build a new, clear vision for arts and culture, something that represents who we are today and reimagines how arts and culture can help us rebuild a more creative, more equitable, and more prosperous future. And we at the City of Portland know that exciting things are happening in Gresham and Hillsborough and Oregon City and Beaverton, Milwaukee, and every corner of this region, so we are taking a regional look at this once again. A little over a year ago, I reached out to the government agencies who are parties to this IGA with RAC, including President Peterson, Councilor Lewis, Marissa Madrigal, and Steve Falstick, and pitched the idea of another regional cultural planning process. And we're just so delighted that you all decided to be investors and participants in this process. Thank you. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we are organizing our work. Each participating jurisdiction, including Metro, has a representative on our project management team. Metro's representative in this process is Robin Williams, director of the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts. I should note here that the cities of Hillsborough and Beaverton also wanted to be part of this process, and we are happy to include them. We also received a generous grant from the James and Marion Miller Foundation to support this project. And although they are not represented on the project management team here, we do remain in close collaboration with them throughout this process because they are the largest private sector funder of arts and culture activities in the state of Oregon and the region. So our first task as this project management team was to hire a consultant to guide us through this process. We launched an RFP last spring, and as I ask you to please advance to the next slide, it is my pleasure to introduce you to David Pletner Saunders of the Cultural Planning Group, the firm that we've hired for this process. Cultural Planning Group is a national firm with tremendous experience developing arts and culture plans across the country, and they've been doing great work for us since last summer. David will talk you through the rest of our process and next steps. So I'll turn it over to you, David.
Oh, David, you may be on mute. David, we can't hear you. If you would unmute, or maybe someone can help him with that.
No, I got it.
There we go.
You'd think this long into the post-pandemic phase, I would have the unmute button already mastered. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you, Jeff, and thank you to all of you, commissioners and counselors, for this opportunity to brief you today on the cultural plan to date. This slide shows the planning team overseeing the process. It's a large team for a big project. There are 4 of us from Cultural Planning Group, and as Jeff said, we're a national firm with a lot of experience in cultural planning in communities large and small throughout the country. We are joined in this effort by Metropolitan Group, also a national firm, but based in Portland. Probably many of you are well aware of Met Group. They've got long experience as consultants in the region, but in particular in the cultural community. And Met Group has engaged 2 additional local partners on our team to assist with our engagement, Kathleen Holt and Michael Alexander. Next slide, Connor. So our work is overseen by a steering committee representing the community's voice in this process. The group is diverse by design and cross-sector. So it includes people who work in the arts and culture sector, tourism, business community, funders, local government, education, and more. This reflects the many ways arts and culture relate to the community as a whole, and it brings diverse perspectives to the task of planning. Members also represent all 3 counties. I'd like to mention that Commissioner Karis Studemeyer-Phillips is a steering committee member, and I know she updated the commission on the process at a recent meeting. Commissioner Milan attended one of our discussion groups last week. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the steering committee at our orientation session last November. Some of our meetings have been in person, many have been virtual or hybrid, like this one. Next slide, please. So cultural plans are based on community engagement. This is the essential opportunity of planning to consult with and listen to the community. Big picture, you'll see here that after a preparation phase, we are doing both qualitative and quantitative engagement. Qualitative here means in-person and virtual discussion groups, interviews, and community conversations. In a moment, we'll provide some examples and share with you some preliminary findings or observations to date. We're also conducting quantitative research to complement the discussion-based input. The next slide. Here's our timeline for planning. We spent the first 6 months preparing for planning. We reviewed relevant background documents. We composed the steering committee, and we conducted a set of internal interviews. We met with Marissa Madrigal and Steve Falstick as a part of that process. We're now in phase 2, and we will complete our qualitative community engagement at the end of May. We will then spend the summer working with the steering committee to digest what we've learned and to identify our conclusions. In the fall, we will continue working with the steering committee in phase 3 to develop the draft plan. The draft will go through a community review and vetting process, and once it's ready, it will be presented to the 7 jurisdictions for review and adoption or acceptance. This will be complete by the second quarter of 2024. Next slide. So I said that community engagement is the basis for cultural planning, and you know from your own experience that people engage in civic affairs, or they don't, in very different ways. So it's important to have multiple entry points for people to register their opinion. Like with our steering committee, we view diversity as a way to get beyond what we already know. And we're relying on our steering committee and project management team to assist us with being inclusive in this process. We look for ways to meet people where they are, and we're adapting our discussions to build on what we're learning as we go. Next slide. Here's a photo of a youth discussion group from last week. The group was organized by 2 nonprofits, New Narrative and Ascending Flow. These organizations serve foster youth and those who are aging out of the system. And we held this meeting at Ascending Flow Studio in East Portland. Next slide. So taking a look now at the quantitative research, we're conducting an arts market study, which gauges the strength and character of public demand for the arts. So who's in the audience, how strong is their desire, who's not in the audience, and where are they? We're also developing an inventory and maps of cultural assets, including nonprofit arts and cultural organizations, other providers, community-based organizations like New Narrative, and public art. This research is still in process, but we learned there are more than 7,000 works of public art in the Tri-County region. We're preparing a review of arts grant making, public and private. How much total is granted to the arts in the region? Who receives it and where are they? And lastly, we're conducting 2 versions of a community survey. First is an open community survey in 6 languages. Anyone can participate, and we have more than 800 responses to date. And we'll have an ask for you to help us with survey distribution at the end of our presentations. The second version of the survey is a statistically valid methodology, and that survey is currently underway. Next slide, please. We expect to have completed more than 50 community engagement discussions when we're done. And here's a sampling of sessions held to date or on the calendar for the next couple of weeks. One thing I'd like to point out is that we're making specific efforts to move around the 3 counties. And with the help of our county partners, we've been able to engage the Washington and Clackamas County stakeholders, as well as East County. Next slide, please. Here's another photo of a discussion group from last week. The man in the front row with the big smile is Sankar Raman, a steering committee member and founder of a nonprofit organization called The Immigrant Story. They just did a major performance at the Research Center earlier in April. Sankar organized this session for immigrant artists from a number of different countries. Next slide, please. So as we said earlier, we wanted to share some preliminary observations with you, what we've been hearing. I want to caveat this by saying we've not yet completed or analyzed all the discussion findings, but that said, there are some consistent messages from throughout the region that we feel confident sharing with you today. First, the region's creative sector is struggling and needs assistance. This is more than the usual message of wanting more money. Artists and arts organizations are experiencing stress arising from multiple challenges in the region. The rising cost of living, the shortage of available and affordable creative spaces and housing, issues in downtown Portland, financial challenges for arts organizations, changes in audience behaviors post-pandemic, regulatory barriers, and for many, a lack of respect from and trust in local government. There's a sense that things are not only more difficult, but also more predictable and harder to manage. People throughout the region express that they feel disconnected from one another, and they seek productive ways to reconnect professionally and to be part of a shared cultural vision and direction. On the positive side of the ledger, many inside and outside the sector view arts and culture as a part of the solution, a powerful partner in revitalization and addressing other civic problems. Arts can be part of the response to houselessness, mental health, public safety, economic growth, and rekindling civic pride and image, to name just a few. And lastly, Jeff referred in his opening to the first cultural plan in 1992 and the 1995 intergovernmental agreement that authorized the RAC and established a visionary regional approach to cultural development. He's right in saying that you really have been a national model in innovating in this space with your regional approach to planning and organizing civic efforts. But it's clear that the vision remains unfulfilled, the original vision of the intergovernmental agreement. In the ensuing almost 30 years, it's only been partially implemented. There's no regional public funding source. There's been limited and unequal county buy-in. And regional services to the sector are focused primarily on grant making and public art. Next slide, please. We can also share several needs that we can also see as opportunities in the cultural plan, and they will likely become part of the plan's recommendations in some form. First, we should view the creative sector as a whole. This includes individual artists and makers, nonprofit arts and cultural organizations, community-based organizations that do arts programming, commercial arts enterprises, and many more. They are all thoroughly interrelated and mutually reinforcing or interdependent in one sector. This plan should focus on the specific needs of artists and arts and cultural organizations. Their situation cannot be ignored. We see the progress made when parts of the creative sector come together and organize. The City of Portland's new Office of Events and Film is one example with their Events Action Table Network. This is a network of event producers, and their monthly meetings have led to a number of specific improvements for their business environment. Another example is Music Portland, which is working to improve the environment for the music industry. It's developed a very strong network and policy platform, which is now in the process of being implemented. There are multiple other opportunities similarly to convene subsectors of the creative economy and to convene across sectors. And in that vein, we would like to see the creative economy elevated within the region's economic development strategies. Talking now about creative spaces, the plan can address these needs, must address these needs. There are a range of potential actions ranging from a directory of available spaces, to technical assistance for developers, to matching funds that could improve this situation. It's also clear that a systemic solution is needed for P5 and its major arts institution users. You're quite familiar, we know, with these issues. These challenges are interrelated, and we know that Metro and Merck are currently developing the venue's visioning report to provide guidance or options to inform this task. And I know that's another item on your agenda for today. We've heard a great deal about continuing inequities in the arts and culture space. The region now has a practice of investing to a certain extent in better access to arts and culture, and we would like to see this practice expanded, such as partnerships with parks, libraries, schools, community-based organizations, and others serving specific populations. New Narrative, Ascending Flow, Immigrant Story, these are all perfect examples of potential partners in that space. And lastly, I want to mention that we've met separately with foundation funders and corporation funders in the arts, and we believe there's a strong potential for funder collaborations around issues of community-wide importance. that would amplify the impact of their philanthropy. Next slide, please, Connor. I said earlier we had an ask for you about the community survey. If you're able to push out an invitation and link to the survey, please relay your information to staff and we'll follow up with you. The survey is also available in the Our Creative Future website. And our last slide, please. Thank you, thank you. We appreciate your time and attention today, and we'd be happy to answer your questions and engage in any discussion.
All right, thank you, David, and thank you, Jeff, for the presentation and all your hard work bringing people together and advancing this project. Before you go, though, I'd like to open it up to councilors, commissioners. Any questions, comments for our presenters? All right. Oh, Councilor Rosenthal.
I'll ask one question. I noticed some of the outreach was in Russian. Have you received any feedback? I mean, Portland has a substantial Ukrainian population, and I'm just wondering if there's been any feedback from them on that.
Thank you for the question, Counselor. We have not received any feedback that I'm aware of, but if you have any suggestions for ways that we can conduct outreach to that community, I would be interested in hearing from you.
I speak a little Russian, but no Ukrainian.
Thank you.
Councilor Nolan, go right ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming that my good friend Danielle Milan, since you're involved in this, have assured that smaller arts organizations, especially performing arts organizations, are represented. I didn't see too many on the list of steering committee members. I just want to put a marker out that I think we need to be very committed to engaging smaller arts organizations, especially ones that are led by artists and leaders from the BIPOC community in this engagement. Lifting them up, space, gallery space, performing arts space, rehearsal space can be a real challenge, and it's a highlight in your message, and I want to make sure their voices are there.
Thank you for that, Councilor Nolan. We have, as noted, attended the Arts Gatherers meeting that was last week and noted that there could be more Latino representation on the steering committee, and I think there's efforts being made in that direction.
Yes, thank you, Counselor, and thank you, Commissioner. I would add that the meeting that the Commissioner attended last week was specifically for small and mid-sized arts organizations, and it was one of our most well-attended meetings. We had about 50 representatives of local arts organizations show up for that meeting at the Portland Building. It was a wonderful reminder of how important and diverse this sector is. And as the Commissioner noted, we are making some adjustments to the steering committee to ensure more Latino, Latinx representation. Thank you.
I'm with her.
Thank you.
Councilor Wong, go right ahead.
Commissioner Hall, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about kind of the long-term plans and usage of this planning process and how it might lead to additional kind of arts funding for the whole ecosystem. Is there a plan for us to kind of scale that up using this process?
Thank you. David, would you be willing to take that question? I've heard you speak very well about what we do with the plan and its long-term usefulness.
Sure. So if I understood your question correctly, it was how will the plan be used and implemented in general, and how will it help increase arts funding?
Yes, that's right. Thanks.
Great. So let's talk about money first. 30 years ago, the very small joke in the cultural planning field was that there's a 1-point program in cultural planning, which is more money for the arts. And really that meant more public money for the arts. And while cultural planning has diversified and become much more sophisticated in the ensuing 30 years, it's still an important topic, and it is in the region. Both Jeff and I highlighted that in our remarks, that there's a kind of unfulfilled need and desire to increase the amount of money in the system. And it's been documented multiple times that there isn't enough money in the system. And while money is not the whole solution, it is part of the solution. So yes, we're thinking about it. We're certainly considering the possibility of modifying the arts tax, because we've heard chapter and verse of people's frustrations with how it was originally intended to serve the arts community and how it actually ended up being implemented. So that's one possibility. We know that it's difficult for Metro to propose a regional funding source at this point in time. But we would like to come back to Marissa and Steve and explore some possible alternatives in the regional area. And we will certainly be exploring the possibility of increased funding from the 3 cities and the 3 county governments. I also want to mention that we were very heartened by the discussion groups with corporate funders and foundation funders. Like the rest of the creative sector, they have felt disconnected from one another, and we're very happy to convene. They hadn't convened as a group in years, and they would like to continue meeting. So we see that as a hopeful sign. So moving on from arts funding, I wanted to talk about the kind of use of the cultural plan and its implementation. This plan, we believe, is unique in the nation by its regional nature. We've done 1 or 2 other regional plans, but never one of this diversity and complexity. As Jeff mentioned, there are 7 jurisdictions participating. So we will have a lot of presenting to do in the first half of 2024 in going to the various governments and coming back to all of you to present the plan. There will be a regional plan as well as specific recommendations for each of the 7 jurisdictions. We're not sure how each of them will land. You know, we know that the City Council in Portland is eager to see what the cultural plan says. They are seeking guidance from the cultural plan to shape their role in arts and culture. On the other side of the ledger, we haven't yet been able to meet with the county administrator or commissioners from Clackamas County. We've had several attempts to schedule that, but they've been rescheduled. And just given what we know about their financial circumstances, we're not sure their political will to take on an expanded role in arts and culture beyond what they're doing now. So I think the use of and implementation of the cultural plan across the 7 jurisdictions will vary. And I think a lot will be dependent on the community's advocacy and kind of push to make sure that the plans are not only adopted, but are part of the budgeting process.
Great, thank you. And Councilor Lewis and I have a great pleasure of serving on our placemaking committee here at Metro, and we have $200,000 annually to distribute, and we usually get 100-some applications and can fund about 10. So we'd love to have some deeper conversations about how we can collaborate with other jurisdictions and funders to grow that pot. Thanks.
I'm making a note, thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on Councilor Wong's comments and question. The term regional, right? I've always struggled with it because I think I was at Clackamas County when we did the last update, and it is hard. It's hard to define in my head how we get to a regional in the future, at least in the near term. Could you give a little bit of like background on other regional arts organizations? I know Minneapolis-St. Paul has one. I don't know about others, but you know how they're framed and how they're funded.
David, do you have some examples to share? Because I know that the regional approach is less common than a hyper-local approach in terms of art service delivery, but David may be more familiar with comparable models in other parts of the country.
We've been asked to look into other regional approaches to cultural development, and we'll be doing that over the summer. It's part of our benchmarking. But I can say that our experience with regional arts planning is in Kansas City. And that is a 5-county region that's served by a nonprofit regional arts council. And I would say that their regional approach is a combination of public and private dollars. So there is what they call a United Arts Fund that is an annual campaign with foundations and corporations to fund the arts in a regranting program. So it's not dissimilar to RAC. In principle, it's the same. There is a very strong tradition, however, in Kansas City of major private philanthropy. And in the past, at least, there's been a lot of corporate giving, big dollars. So the situation is different. And we'll probably be revisiting Kansas City's current circumstances as a part of our benchmarking. The more common approach would be a county-wide approach. That is quite common. Los Angeles County is an example. It's a major, local arts agency that serves 82 cities, I believe, in LA County. And I'm not clear how useful that kind of model will be for, the Portland region.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I bring up the Minneapolis-St. Paul is because they're 17, 18 Fortune 500 companies come together on a monthly basis and work together biannually on specific topics. And I know that they have tackled arts, and it's from an economic standpoint of they are competing for workforce amongst each other and amongst the rest of the nation. So they compete to basically make sure that the Minneapolis-St. Paul region is an attractive, livable, healthy place to be. So I would love to hear more about how they've set up and any others like Austin, places where we actually compete directly with what's going on there. That would be helpful to know. And you're right. I mean, we don't have the same giving atmosphere here. So I think that it does make it harder, but it would be nice to understand where others have landed and why.
Thank you, President Peterson. We will include that in our study.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Thanks for all the work and for the briefing today. I guess first I would offer a few suggestions with Clackamas. I understand where you might be at with the county commission, but the cities of Lake Oswego, Westland, and Milwaukee each have art commissions. So those bodies are independent of council and advise those city councilors on how to be more involved in the arts. This might be a good place to look for more input from where I live. I guess I'm looking at the idea of comparator cities, not only for how the other cities engage with the arts on the ground and through major philanthropy, but also intersecting with NEA. And I would be curious if you had any NEA insights thus far, or if that was something we could expect out of the final presentation. And then Business for Culture and Arts has shuttered. What is your assessment of the opportunity for that kind of engagement here in this community, if you have a recommendation yet?
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. In terms of comparing and benchmarking to other communities, some of the ones that we've identified, only because these are communities that Portland tends to compare itself to in terms of regional comparable markets, would include Seattle, Salt Lake City, Nashville. There are a couple others in there, and we're always welcoming input from the participating jurisdictions, including Metro, about what communities you'd like us to compare ourselves to. So thank you for that suggestion, and we will compare many things, including NEA funding in those metropolitan areas. That's all data that is readily available to us, as well as data on the creative industries in all of those communities, which I think is going to be really enlightening as well. In terms of Business Committee for the Arts, as David mentioned, that conversation that we had with corporate funders a few days ago was very reaffirming and encouraging. What we found, or what BCA would describe as the reason for their demise, was that the membership model on which they were based was no longer working for them. The idea that businesses would pay a membership fee in order to engage their employees in arts activities, and they were just finding it, they were unable to make ends meet using that old business model. And unfortunately, they shuttered before a new business model could be found. But given the enthusiasm that we heard at that meeting with all manner of corporate funders the other day, I think we can collaborate with them and potentially identify some new models to re-engage the business community and their employees in arts and culture for the long term. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that discussion. Any further questions, comments? Okay, thank you again, David and Jeff. Appreciate your presentation and all your great work.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move us along in the agenda to talk about the venues visioning update. If Steve and Susan, you could come up. This next agenda item, as you may recall, we embarked on a project to clearly define Metro's priorities, values, and role as the operator of the region's large visitor venues. Through this process, we hope to develop a path toward long-term sustainability of our venues ecosystem and take steps towards making the region a world-class destination for residents and visitors. All right, so welcoming back Metro's General Manager of Visitor Venues, Steve Falstick, and our venues visioning consultant, Ms. Susan Hartnett. Please take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, President Peterson, Vice Chair Hall, councilors, commissioners. Happy to be here this morning to share some updates. As you all can tell, venues are happening right now within Metro and across the region, and we've got some good updates for you today. Introducing with me is Susan Hartnett, the principal of Hartnett and Associates, who's been project managing this for us since September, October, somewhere in there. You see our gorgeous venues here, and we're going to talk about the recent and ongoing efforts to address the roles and needs at Metro's venues, including the Expo Future Project, Keller Auditorium Evaluation, Portland 5 Intergovernmental Agreement, and the Oregon Zoo Master Planning. We'll also collaborate with our Creative Future, as you just heard about, co-creating an arts and cultural plan for all, a regional project being led by the city of Portland. So venues visioning, just a little bit of background, inspired in early 22, and actually probably earlier than that, by conversations with the Metro leadership team, conceived as an 18-month process to evaluate the state of all visitor venues across the region, a collaboration of Metro Council, Merck Commission, visitor venues leadership, regional leadership, and community stakeholders. Our project team that has been working on this, next slide please, includes Nancy Straining, CPMO, is our project manager, myself, Will Norris from our finance team, Amy Nelson, my administrative assistant, is project coordinator, Kimberly Abels from our communications team, and of course, Susan Hartnett. Goals of venues visioning, as have been expressed before, next slide please, include to assess and address long-term financial viability of Metro's current venue portfolio, identify regional venue benefits, needs, gaps, opportunities, and address inequities, and revisit Metro's role in supporting the venue's ecosystem and creating a shared vision. The scope elements that we heard about include Metro should focus on managing and improving its current portfolio of venues, and Metro should lead a regional effort to identify and address what is missing in the venue ecosystem. You always need to have an agreement about what you're taking on. So the defining venues was a question posed in interviews. The main themes that came from participants were distilled to create the working definition. That's the next slide, by the way. So we landed on places and spaces where people gather to celebrate culture, enjoy performances, play or watch sports, exchange knowledge through shared experiences in a safe environment. So what is the venue's ecosystem? Having asked people to share their definition of venues, we wanted to know which should be the part of venues visioning efforts. Some people said stick with or at least start with just the existing portfolio. However, people that felt that the needs to include a regional gap analysis were more expansive. Generally, the message was, be thoughtful and think broadly in inventory effort, think ecosystem, include publicly and privately owned, down to small purpose-built and those that substitute when nothing else is available. Sports venues like Moda Center, Providence Park, Hillsborough Stadium, Hayward Field, et cetera. Colleges, the Reeser Center for the Arts, you get the idea. So with that, I want to go to the next slide, which talks about the venue's visioning timeline. Again, that was shared with you. So again, the key thing on this is when this started, if you go back 18 months or even 2 years, Expo Futures was a very different project. We knew nothing about the cultural planning that you just heard about. The Keller project was still on the shelf, and the P5 intergovernmental agreement had yet to be started. Fast forward to where we are today, and what we're going to be calling for is a little bit of change in our timeline. And I've had a chance to share this with some of you, but I kind of want to share that more broadly in our further discussion. So what's been done to date? We talked about gathering a team, planning and implement key stakeholder input process that Susan has led, clarifying project scope and risks, as we heard a lot of different input on that, defining key project components, developing the draft work plan and resource needs, assessing capacities, which we've spent a lot of time on in the last few weeks, and recommend of adjusting focus and timeline. So stakeholder input, the overview of kind of the raw data, 28 people, I think most, if not all of you, were interviewed, understanding kind of our raw data and themes, and developing material that was shared with those individuals. Next slide, please. So just an overview. I'm not going to read through all of these, but again, giving a little bit of more detail on the projects that I spoke of and the complexity that each of them are addressing in their own different manner. Next slide, please. And what those timelines look at, right? The crossover. And the key thing, I think that one of the key messages that I want to talk about is venues visioning really isn't time sensitive as all of these other projects are. And that's a key component in what we're going to share as far as project recommendations. So project risks that have been identified, significant funding likely needed to fulfill outcomes from both elements. And again, we're looking to the long term of a bigger project team, a research component that would need to be engaged. That community engagements are included in both the time and staff resources needed. Again, the gap analysis that really shared, and again, we talk about redundancy as we have identified that early, and then we found the redundancy in cultural planning is actually doing a much broader analysis of that, of which, by the way, that Metro is participating in. Address Metro's venues to get bogged down by the regional discussion and limited capacity, as we know, kind of stakeholder exhaustion right now with the many projects that are going on. So where that leads us is, I want to talk about, share the, next slide, please, by the way. Thank you. So as we talk about these projects, Expo, as you've heard about, and you'll hear more in the future from Paul Slyman and his team, is critical right now under the microscope that this is a successful project. The complexity of what that looks like with the different steering committees and teams means that we have an additional stretch on our internal as well as our external stakeholders for their time on our committees, their input to this very critical process and timeline that we're on. Keller project, again, as we know, we'll talk about momentarily, has relaunched and is on a very quick time frame that, again, is taking time and critical time and resources from within, and that's only going to build in the coming months. And then Creative Futures scope, you heard about, and hopefully some of what they talked about rung true of what we've told you in the past, primarily gap analysis, competitive city survey. Those were things that were on our scope. Does it make sense for us to pursue those while that work is being done by a much larger team, by the way? It does not. And so we want to kind of take a little pause on that. And then the last one is, it's become more and more critical that the intergovernmental agreement is in need of focus in the short term, with a lot of opportunities, as we've heard about, all of the work that's being done, but we have opportunities within these buildings. The Keller obviously is a part of what's being addressed, but we also have a significant bond coming down the path in hopefully 2 years, but maybe 3. That's a significant amount of money that needs planning on how that's going to be spent to our strategy for these venues. And so prioritizing, again, we talked about allocating the majority of our resources now to Expo. We want to really take venues visioning and give it a little pause as these other projects play out, and the ability to pick up the ball when that's done and run with fulfilling it. That doesn't mean that we want to stop venues visioning. We really want to dig into the P5 intergovernmental agreement, what we heard from the audit that needs to be addressed, but also the opportunities to really fix a lot of things that have been maybe broken, but maybe just opportunities, right, to further improve how these buildings are run in partnership with the city. We want to gather missing information, and we still have some opportunities to do that with our competitive city. There is some work that can be done just significant for us, and we want to plan strategic engagement once the other projects are more informed and resources are freed up. So proposed project plan, as you can see on the next slide, with some lovely, colorful steps in here, really outlines kind of what we see as a little bit of a revised timeline. And then finally, again, with the new task for venues visioning on the next slide talks about the inventory of ecosystem, understanding regional contributions, create metro portfolio overviews, gather, develop information about places, and developing an engagement strategy based on the output of those other projects and where we want to pick that up. So again, what we've shared with you in the past, how this project kind of launched is in a very different place, and we've been very reflective in discussing internally, discussing with Marisa, discussing with many of the commissioners and councilors, that it just makes sense from a resource standpoint to shift focus to a very valuable focus on the P5 work as these other projects play out. So with that, completes our presentation, and I'm happy to engage any questions. By the way, our comparison cities that have come up that were just talked about, Susan and I were whispering back there to probably want to add Kansas City on that, and others through that lens, Minneapolis as well. But this competitive city was really based on more of a broad venue look at, who we compete against. This is actually a list that Travel Portland had compiled as we look at convention business, but we think a lot applies. And I think that's our last slide. Just a little taste of some of the preliminary comparison data, by the way, that we've started with, but this is going to be much broader to include venues, to include how they're funded, to include venues per capita type fund data information, but just a little bit of kind of some of the work that's been done already for us. With that, we'll take questions, comments that you may have.
All right, thank you much. Opening it up to councilors and commissioners. Councilor Nolan.
Mr. Chair, thanks. My question actually harkens back to the presentation we had just before, but it's a question to both you, Steve, and our city representative. There was some slight allusions to less enthusiastic partners, or at least one in the previous presentation. I'm interested in who the most enthusiastic partners, governmental as well as private, organizations, but individuals, because to get these things to happen, there have to be a few people who really dig into this and say, I'm going to put my personal muscle behind it. I'm going to make sure others are excited about it. Other than the folks in this room, who I'm sure are all in that boat, tell me who you identify as the most enthusiastic partners.
I've got comments too.
Councilor Nolan, thank you very much for that question. Our outreach was very limited. I think you know that. It was pretty much the people in this room. We didn't make any specific outreach to government partners beyond the city of Portland. And I will say, we experienced some of the same challenges that Jeff Hawthorne described in terms of his outreach for the Creative Future work. I will say that's not what we found at the staff level. There's commitment, willingness, interest, but we did hear a fair amount, not only from folks who work for the city of Portland, but also within this room, people saying concern about the capacity for Portland elected leadership to devote attention to this topic. And real concern about making it too broad, that regional gap analysis being perhaps way more than the city of Portland could take on, and figuring out how to engage the city of Portland around the Portland 5 and the agreement that rules Metro's involvement as operator and the city of Portland as owner of those facilities. I think Jeff's outreach has been broader to a larger community. I don't know if he wants to come up and add anything. I think the question of corporate and philanthropic participation, that's a challenge in this area, and we've lost a lot of large corporate participants over time, and that's going to be something we're going to have to rebuild. I will say a number of people in my interview process talked about potentially using something like a task force as a way of elevating within the region, you know, leaders who are willing to put their shoulder to it as a way of elevating this conversation. So, Jeff, did you want to?
And we'll have Jeff come up, but I'll add in that, and again, we haven't gotten to those stakeholders, right? Ultimately, we will, but I think one key message that we heard early on is like Metro is on a power trip wanting to take over venues in the region, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Really and truly couldn't be further from the truth. And so when Marisa asked us at the beginning of the process to include like, what is Metro's role? And we talked a lot about that. And really it's a leadership and a collaboration role. You know, a great comment to P5, for example, that Councilor Lewis brought up yesterday is we want our communities in our theaters, but we also want our theaters in our communities, right? So what is the intersection that we can be more influential with the expertise that we have, and as I say, collaborate with the great work that's being done with cultural planning. Prosper Portland has got some great things at work to build on not only the density of artists, but also the workforce that goes around that is really lacking in our region. So we want to, you know, play a stronger role, whatever that looks like. Maybe we're not quite sure yet, whether it's convener or influencer, what it may be, but we definitely see this holistically. And I think when we do have those conversations regionally, they're going to be much more open-minded as opposed to us coming in to, you know, try to get the keys to facilities, whatever it may be.
And Councilor Nolan, I would just add that in terms of the cultural planning process, I think it remains to be seen who will carry the mantle depending on what the recommendations are that come out of that plan. But I am really excited about the level of enthusiasm we are seeing when we call a meeting to which anyone can attend, or when we invite people to a special discussion focus group. The way in which people are showing up and participating in those conversations with great enthusiasm and wonderful ideas is a harbinger of good things to come, I think, in terms of the level of enthusiasm and commitment that we will have, not only from the arts community, but the community at large, to advance the recommendations that emerge from this plan.
Thanks for that, and I take from that we haven't yet identified those people, and that speaks to, I'm looking around at the decision makers around the table, that I think an early role that Metro can and should play is to be the catalyst, the spark. And that probably means us, making it something so compelling that others want to join in, or offering technical support that is so valuable that our local partners might be able to focus on the performing and the culture, and we can help in ways with administrative or that kind of calendaring thing. I don't know what workforce, as you said, Steve.
I'd just add one thing, and I think as we move forward with venue visioning, one of the things that we're going to focus on is gathering and accumulating information for the leaders in this room to use in a narrative that engages other elected leaders, corporate leadership, philanthropic leadership, all of that. I think in my conversation with you, I recall that you said, arm me and I'll go out and talk. So I'm sorry, I did say I would keep all of that confidential, but I did find that a very inspiring and energizing comment. So I hope you're okay that I shared it. And that's what I see us doing in our next stage, is helping give everybody in this room, in collaboration with Jeff's work, enough information to go out and create that energy that we're gonna need to create, so.
Sign me up.
All right, additional thoughts, questions, discussion? Councilor Rosenthal.
Just a question, I'm still, I guess, a little bit confused. Well, also, your slide, Milwaukee is misspelled. Having been born there, it's not an IE, but that's a minor thing. They might be offended, I'm not sure. But my question, I'm still a little confused as to, since Portland is focusing on a regional perspective and we're focusing much more on our own venues, how are we going to incorporate the results of that Project Forward evaluation into what we do? I mean, it seems like it might be sort of awkward at some points.
So I would start by saying our cultural future is really focusing regionally, and they're getting feedback regionally on accessibility to cultural and art performance and exhibit and all of that. I think part of what we'll try and do with venue visioning is to focus on venues that provide opportunities for other types of gatherings, sports, business, that kind of stuff, to help fill those gaps. And I think, and I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Can you tell me again what you were asking about? I'm sorry.
How are we going to incorporate the broader vision that might come out of the Portland Focus study onto things we do? I mean, I sort of see how it would apply to Expo, because that is it has a much more regional focus, but on the other ones particularly.
Well, and I do think there's a lot of interest in understanding first what's out there right now in the way of venues of all types and understanding what's missing. So cultural planning will be contributing to that, and I think venue visioning will be as well, in looking more closely at the variety of venues that are present in the region.
Okay. All right. And it strikes me that I've not been doing a great job monitoring our colleagues that are on Zoom, so just want to take a moment to see if there are any questions from Zoom before we move on. All right. Hearing none. Susan, Steve, thank you for the presentation. Jeff, thanks for jumping back up. I appreciate it. And so, Steve, it seems like you're going to stick around for our next topic, which is the Keller Feasibility Project update. And Steve Falstick will be joined by the Construction Project Manager, Nancy Strenning. Please take it away.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall, and President Peterson, and councilors and commissioners once again. Excited to update you as well on kind of what's been happening with the Keller Auditorium feasibility effort. Today we'll be discussing what the project is, why it is important, the previous work to date, the current project team, stakeholders and status, upcoming work and deliverables, and we certainly look forward to feedback from you all. So I just want to briefly talk about the sponsors of this project. And again, this has been shared before. I just want to kind of give you a quick reminder. Metro and the City of Portland have partnered with the Halprin Landscape Conservancy, many of whose members own property in the neighborhood, who have all made financial commitments to ensure the safety and success of Keller's future productions and live events. Nancy Straining is Metro's project manager, and she is working alongside the counterparts from the city and Halpern. I'm going to hand the rest of the presentation over to Nancy to walk you through where we are today.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, President Peterson and Vice Chair Hall and councilors and commissioners. I'll start with a reminder of the why of the project. The Keller is the largest theatrical auditorium. Oh, next slide. The Keller is the largest theatrical auditorium in the state of Oregon and the only one large enough to accommodate large shows and concerts. And so as such, it plays a very important role as these commercial productions and concerts are among the more profitable shows. They represent approximately half of the organization's total annual revenue. So the financial success of these large commercial shows at the Keller helps P5 support local nonprofits and the operation of smaller theaters, making local productions more accessible, feasible, and affordable. Next slide, please. Additionally, the financial success of programming at the Keller helps support P5's community engagement efforts. Next slide. So as a reminder of where we've been, in 2017, the Halpern Landscape Conservancy, along with some local developers and building owners near the Keller, conducted an international design competition seeking ways to enliven, activate, and improve the neighborhood around the Keller. It was focused on the exterior of the building. Around the same time, the City of Portland conducted a seismic structural study of the building, and that report reflected the scope and cost of the massive structural work the hall needs. Additionally, the City of Portland and P5 did an evaluation of the deferred maintenance and operational needs of the facility, which has not undergone an extensive renovation since the 1960s. Finally, theatrical consultants and designers gave input on what other improvements could be made in order to make the Keller an exceptional venue positioned to serve future performances and audiences. The next step at the time was to further develop the various concepts. All this came to a head in around March of 2020. Next slide, please. So after a pandemic-driven pause, interest in the project was reignited in 2022, and the city and Metro committed to providing funding, matched by the HLC, to further develop the design and refine cost and constructability information on HLC's conceptual design. HLC assembled a team of architects, structural engineers, theater consultants, and the theatrical production designers that were the winners of the aforementioned design competition to develop a concept that would create a Keller that would be safe and accessible for audiences, safe, efficient, and comfortable for clients, performers, and staff, a hub of neighborhood vitality, and an opportunity to deliver on some of the promises of Metro's sustainable sites and buildings policy. Next slide. We've completed the programming and needs phase, which included a 2-day workshop with stakeholders in February. Stakeholders included representatives of P5 staff and executive management, the Oregon Ballet Theater, the Portland Opera, and Broadway Across America. The team toured the auditorium, and stakeholder interviews reviewed and validated the existing documents and information. Gaps and new needs were also identified. We're currently in the concept feasibility phase, and stakeholders will re-engage in workshops next week. They'll review conceptual design progress and obtain feedback on schematic plans, incorporating the programming needs and workshop information. In mid-June, there'll be a 1-day workshop, which will include the final validation of the design concept, the design team recommendations, and the preliminary land use analysis and cost estimate. July will see work on the interim operations strategy, lost revenue analysis, construction schedule and phasing, analysis of public contracting requirements, all culminating in a final design concept and report to be delivered in August. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? Although the communication from the city and Metro about the approval of funds mentioned a council decision in the spring of 2024, this project scope is limited to just one scheme, and any decision about how to address the Keller's challenges will require additional scope and resources. Key activities there will be the consideration of this particular concept, scope, schedule, and budget information by the City of Portland, exploration of alternative sites, either temporary or permanent, validation of assumptions and assessment of the risks of this particular proposed scheme, additional structural analysis, determination of Metro's role in the renovation or rebuilding of the Keller, and confirmation of the availability of city and/or Metro resources to deliver such a project. Given the Keller's seismic, accessibility, and operational issues, and the unique ability among the region's venues to accommodate large shows and Broadway productions, the need for renovation or replacement is clear. There are multiple ways the city and P5 could proceed that would ensure the region has a large performing arts venue that can accommodate equitable access to the education programs, cultural events, and world-class performances for years to come. We'll be back in a few months to share more details on the implications of that particular solution. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions? All right.
Just a quick question.
Commissioner Pendleton, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. You know, prior to 2020, you know, we've seen this already start in terms of whether it be donors, sponsors, or the corporate piece pulling out their support. And where's the gap? What is it that you see that we're missing there?
For financial support for any kind of renovation.
I don't know that we're there yet, right? As far as, I mean, that's part of the conversation that's happening, along with the city, you know, and Robin Williams and her team. As Jeff said, more money for the arts, right? So it's as far as identifying that gap today, I think that's some of the work that we're gonna discover in the next few months through the process.
All right. So, and I assume when you say gap, you're talking about like a dollar amount or gap in support, or how we would need to change that?
More so than anything, the support. And you're seeing that, you know, throughout the country.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets to some of the conversation Councilor Nolan was talking about how do we, you know, change the discussion, build enthusiasm. We have many needs. We are in the process of documenting those needs in a very reliable way. And, you know, the politics of how do we find solutions to that and change the discussion around that, I think are a big part of this process, and where venue visioning can take the inputs from these other processes and kind of consolidate that and help us with that visioning part. Chair Peterson.
Thank you. I guess my big question is, I mean, this is a City of Portland asset. They own it. We have a partnership with them to operate, maintain, and manage. What is the decision-making structure like in the City of Portland? And I think you had in the last, like, what is Metro's role? That's not clear between Metro and Merck, right? It would be helpful, I think, in our next conversation, if we could bring in the City of Portland Commissioner or staff that are working on this and give us a kind of that overview of where they see that structure and process going, so we can better understand where we can be helpful.
I'm looking for a nod from Carlisle from the city for a future meeting that maybe we can bring that and discuss. Yeah.
Or answer here, I don't care, if we know.
There are some unknowns.
If I might add to the request, and not about the meeting, but I'd also be interested in, you may know this, I don't need it right now. The city owns the asset. City owns P5. But more than just people who live within the city limits enjoy the benefit of those assets. And it would be interesting to know what we know about the audience. These venues draw people from out of town. How much of that is going on? How much of the, you know, how many of the audience members are from Clackamas County, from Marion County, from Lane County, from Vancouver? Because I think we need, as you've suggested before, a conversation with the city about their responsibilities here. But we also probably need a conversation within the region about the value that those assets provide for the region. You've got a lot on your plate, as you said, Steve.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. I want to rephrase Councilor Nolan's earlier question, I guess. I mean, I actually don't go to Broadway shows or ballet or even some of those other things. I go to symphony concerts. But the concept of Portland without something like the Keller to have these is really unconscionable. So the question is, how do we find and how do we activate Keller heroes? And it's probably going to be a small group. It's not going to be the Metro Council as a council. It's going to be a bunch of, how do we activate this group of people who are really willing to take this and really make this a cause? And I'm not sure I have, ideas, but it's going to have to draw from the entire region in some ways. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, as I think as we get into the price tag discussion, I think it's a critical part of how it gets done. I don't have the answers today, but I know those discussions are coming and others have thoughts on it. So, yeah, we'll see. But back to your original comment of what would the region be without it is unconscionable, to say the least.
All right. I think I may have seen a question coming from this side. Yes, Commissioner Milan, please.
So, thank you. I think in conversations at Merck that did come up about the issue of the users of the space, the ballet, all the community groups that use the Keller, and asking them to be more involved. If it is their primary venue, they should be supportive of that, just like Milagro manages and cares for its building. I think we all have a responsibility as artists in the community to do that. And so maybe perhaps there needs to be a greater effort to reach out to the users and bring them to the table and get more of their input on how they can help improve the space.
Agreed. And I think we've, at Merck talked about this a few times before as far as, and it sounds glib, but, coalition building and finding a basis of support and elevating the conversation about the importance of these venues and the services they provide and the populations they provide into it is a big part of this project.
Yeah.
Well, I said project
Yeah.
writ large, maybe not exactly the reconstruction into physical development and improvements to Keller, et cetera. But yeah.
And going back to our last two conversations, I guess where I would like to have more understanding of how other regions have set themselves up for this. And we have talked a lot about how bond-driven now this organization is and levy-driven. Is there an equivalent to the Zoo Foundation, for instance, that could be set up for the future for all of these things so that it is clear the different roles that different folks play? And if there's a management organization like Merck and Metro is the asset holder in some cases, then who is raising the money? And I know that there are obviously folks that have been working very hard in raising private money for Keller. And how do you set a foundation off of that to bring more people to the table if this is the impetus, but we have bigger needs? Fun stuff. All right.
Looking around the table, any more questions, comments on Keller, or really any of the overlapping discussions that we've had today? All right, well, thank you for your presentation. Nancy, Steve. I believe that we're at the end of our agenda here and a little bit early, so folks get a little bit of time back in your day. Anything you want to say before we adjourn?
Nope. I accept thank you to everyone. I appreciate all of the folks that came forward today and gave us updates. I appreciate these Merck Metro joint meetings. I think it's helpful to hear your questions because you've been more immersed in this in a longer time period, and we're trying to make sure that we're running to keep up with everything that's going on. So thank you for all of your work on the commission as well. With that, seeing no further discussion, we are adjourned from the Metro Council meeting. The Metro work session meeting. We will re-adjourn as Metro Council meeting at 2 p.m. today. So we'll see you back here, Metro Council. Thank you.
Being a-
Recording.